I'll flip it down and I guest speakers. It is funny how these guest speakers, when you talk about labor relations and negotiations and arbitrations, is what I was going to talk about. But a couple of these times that I've come to this class, you hear the speakers talk about unions and communication, and it's almost like I had spoken to the previous speaker, because 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Steve Covey, and we're going to talk about listening and hearing what they're saying, but seek first to understand before you want. Everybody wants to be understood. You want to get your point out there. So anyway, I'll stay on task here and follow the outline. But I'm a lieutenant colonel in the United States Army. I'm with the Brigade Modernization Command. Jim McMillan is the president of the union for all the Brigade Modernization Command. And I've known him for about 2 years. He reports directly to the general, one-star general, who's in command of the Brigade Modernization Command. And we have a GS-15 named Mr. Fletcher, who basically handles all the DA civilians, Department of the Army civilians that we have. And so Jim, my dad taught business law after he retired from the Air Force as a lawyer. Well, you've got somebody that's an expert in the field that does this every day and is teaching you labor relations and unions. And so, that's great. And I know it's got to be more interesting because of that. Anyway, the first thing on there, first bullet there is play within the given rules. It doesn't matter if you're playing baseball, if you're playing 8 and under Little League, T-ball, if you have an SOP, standard operating procedure, or if you have an agreement that's been ironed out between the union and whatever organization, play within the rules. Don't make it up as you go, because that's whatever side you're on, management. And all of you, if you're not already managers, you will be, because that's why you're doing what you're doing right now. So, whether you're on the management side or whether you're representing the union, play within the rules and don't make it up as you go. Second item there, negotiations. Life is a series of negotiations. How many of you are married? Raise your hand. How many have children? Raise your hand. Okay, well, we don't negotiate with the terrorists, the children sometimes. You have to negotiate. You have to negotiate. And so hearing what the issue is, seek first to understand. You have to hear what is the issue. So you got to communicate. You have to listen. The third bullet there, win-win or no deal. Again, we're going back to Steve Covey, who recently died. He died about a year ago, about 80 years old. He was riding a 10-speed bicycle down a big hill in San Francisco, crashed. But if you haven't seen any of the Steve Covey videos, and I don't get any commission for this or anything, but this guy is really good. We were issued these as part of a training that I went through about, 10 years ago now, 8 years ago. And I didn't actually read word for word, and I highlighted it and everything else. Once I started reading it, I thought it was like medicine. I said, okay, I'm going to read 3 pages a day minimum. Well, I started doing this, and I couldn't put it down. I would read it at lunch, and I'm like 3 pages, and I'm like, I got to quit, and I put it down. So it's really good because these are the type of things that, you've heard of continuous improvement process and how you sharpen the saw. One of his principles, number 7, I think, is sharpen the saw. Well, that means you're basically just going back and you're kind of doing an AAR, after action review, and saying, how can I improve? Going back through the principles. So anyway, this is really good stuff. But the win-win principle is win-win or no deal. You want to go into a negotiation that you don't want to win and Roman loses. You want to be win-win. Because if you have a win-lose, or you have a win-lose, you guys probably aren't ever going to deal with each other again. So you want it to be win-win or no deal. And what Steve Covey says is the way you do that is, the people that are affected with that is, the universe is full. There's plenty of win for you and there's plenty of win for you. Everybody can get a good deal. You just have to make sure that you negotiate well, and you're not asking for something that might not be fair. And you're asking, let's say you're negotiating for a car. If you're asking a fair price and somebody's willing to pay a fair price, then it's win-win. That sort of thing. But each side should win, or you're not going to actually deal with each other anymore. That'd be the last type of transaction that happens. and your relationship, like the previous speaker was talking about, is gone. Okay, the fourth bullet there, second to last one, is practice active listening. Okay, I'm mad about this. I'm supposed to be wearing a hearing aid, but it's at the shop getting a power booster or something. But God gave us 2 ears and He gave us 1 mouth. And the rule is 70-30. You should listen 70% of the time and speak 30% of the time. Now, Jim will tell you even this morning, I'm very bad about interrupting people and cutting them off and, cut to the chase. And so we all have to work at this. Negotiation, we can improve our negotiation skills. We can improve our listening skills. So the 70-30 rule. Listen 70% of the time, speak 30% of the time. Seek first to understand, listen first, and then you might not have to do as much talking. I was even accused today of saying, look, it took you 5 minutes to tell me something that should have taken 30 seconds. And it did. Because I was all wound up and I was all fired up. So the last bullet there is no is a good place to start negotiations. Okay? Somebody says, so are you, I recruited for the Army. And so, you go up to somebody and say, have you ever thought about joining the Army? They're like, no. And they say, have you ever thought about joining the reserves? No. Are you interested in the Army? No. Well, like the previous speaker said, find something you can get a yes out of. And that's what the Army teaches you. It says, well, do you like baseball? Yeah, I like baseball. And, well, do you like athletics and people that like baseball? Yeah. Well, the Army's got a lot of people that play baseball and like sports and that sort of thing. So find some yes, get people saying yes to something. Find some common ground somewhere. But no is a good place to start negotiation. A couple tips on negotiations. Don't be in a hurry with negotiations. Americans are very pushy. I've had an opportunity to be in Korea and the Middle East and different places. And I went to high school in Japan. My dad was Air Force, and so I went to high school in Japan. Our society in America, we're very pushy. Other societies, you might go into a negotiation or you might go to a meeting, and the objective of that meeting is just to meet everybody. That's it. In fact, it would be pushy, or it wouldn't even be good manners if you tried to do business on that first day. So, be willing to have a limited objective. In the military, we look at take the objective, take the hill. Well, you got to be willing. So, out of this first meeting, what do I want to get out of this? I want to introduce myself. I want to make sure they have my card. Or I want to make sure that they at least know where I am in case they have a question. So have some limited objectives. Be willing to walk away with just that. Don't take negotiations personally. Okay? We all have personalities, and sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. Some personalities clash. But in negotiation, it's business. And so don't let the personality get in the way where, okay, that's going to kill the deal. It's going to kill the negotiation because my personality got in the way or that person's personality got in the way. So now, if you go into negotiation and everything just clicks, and be willing to go ahead and close the deal, there's no problem with that. But be willing to back away with a limited objective and have an idea of what you're looking to do. And if somebody comes back with a response that you weren't expecting, listen to what they said, and they might actually have something better than what you originally thought is what was your objective. Negotiators are problem solvers. I'm an engineer by background, and so in engineering school, they teach you to find out what's given, what are your assumptions, try to set up the problem, what's missing, what's the question. So you try to set it all up. And sometimes you have everything except for one thing, and you put it in a formula, and all you got to do is solve for the one unknown. And it's really easy. Plug and chug is what they would call it. Well, same way, when we're negotiating, or we're with the union, or we're management, we're listening, we're asking open-ended, fact-finding questions to find out what's the problem. Once we hear the problem, then you ask more questions to let that person talk. They're going to give you some solutions. If you can get them talking, they're going to solve the problem for you, or at least you're going to understand better the problem. And so you're a problem solver. And so we're communicators, we're problem solvers, we're listeners. We don't take it personally. And negotiations, arbitrations, labor relations, we're all learning. And so I'm going to open it up for anybody who'd like to share any of their experiences, or if you have questions, floor is now open. For anybody like to share anything as far as like something like we just talked about, one of those 5 bullets on your sheet there?
Is FA57 your call sign?
No, that stands for Functional Area 57, which is Simulations Operations. I used to be a combat engineer, which is still technically my field, but Functional Area 57 is Simulations Operations. We do computer simulations for the Brigade Modernization Command.
So they number all the functional areas.
Correct.
Didn't I?
Yes, ma'am.
Does it make it difficult for you being active duty and being so bound by strict black and white guidelines and regulations to hold an effective negotiation?
No, and to be honest, I don't really do negotiations, formal negotiations. In our organization, my boss is a GS-14, and he is the senior civilian, DA civilian. We have the union president who just happens to reside in our division, but he's the union president for all the Brigade Modernization Command. And if there was a negotiation, if it got to, other than just your daily negotiations, which we all do, if it got into a formal negotiation, it would be with Mr. McMillan and the general. My boss, who's the GS-14, would get involved because it would involve his division. So the division head would be involved. There might be a second person from the union just to make sure you had to give me a witness, you know. And so that's about correct. Yeah.
Well, they help carry the bodies out.
Correct. And you know, we all are learning too. I mean, you know, it's a real experience today as far as, you know, I need to listen more. And also, you know, the first speaker made a real good point, which I thought related to something that happened today, is, you know, sometimes we go into negotiations and sometimes we realize that we might have been a little too forward and sometimes we got to back up. And sometimes we got to go back to that person we have a relationship with and say, you know, I hope you understand what I was doing, or I might have been a little bit too strong, and then you rebuild that relationship. So we do that all the time. Any other questions?
Do you deal with more than one, sir? You're dealing with just the FGU right now?
I deal with just we have one union at the PNC. Yes. Yeah. Now, I've been in industry, I had a 9-year break in service where I've seen where you might have a plumber's union. You know, I did a more like engineering plant type work, and you'll have the electric, you'll have plumbing, you'll have different groups. Sometimes they fall under, management has to deal with the unions. And I think it's true that, you know, a lot of times management looks at it as just the union, but each separate one might have its own agreement. And the best thing to do is get your professionals involved on anything. That's a good advice. Is you know, like get, you know, if you need a lawyer there, that's fine. But most of the time you just have your representation there, have the right people there that are trained and know what they're doing. And like I personally have not completely read the agreement that we have for our Brigade Modernization Command, but there are people that have, and there's people to deal with that. And so, unless you're called on the carpet about a certain piece of it, it's best to let them negotiate. So, I haven't had to do that, and we have a lot of folks that do that, you know, professionally in our organization. But you got to be careful. Like going back to number 1, play within the rules. So if somebody brings something up and they're saying that this could be a problem, you know, you probably need to go back and research it, you know, and make sure, and then ask the experts to say, are we playing within the rules? And then they might research it because they know where to look a lot better, and they might have to make a few phone calls. Like we have representation at Fort Eustis that basically oversees everything that goes on here, and it's and then there's even representation for TRADOC, and so we can always get the experts involved. But as managers, future managers and managers, you're going to be dealing with this, so it's good to get better at it. Any other questions? Well, I appreciate getting to speak with you, and appreciate Jim asking, and Ida. It's a pleasure. Thank you.